in this new little book that I just published, I thought the cover, whoever designed the covers, really should get some kudos. I don't know if it's cool to show things, but your eye is drawn to two things: the cross and the for all, and these absolutely go together. You know, one of the stories that I heard growing up in an evangelical context was something like this. It was a cutesy little one-liner. Try to understand the Trinity and you'll lose your mind. Um, Fail to believe the Trinity and you'll lose your soul. Well, that's exactly backwards, right? The idea was that, oh yeah, it's easy to believe in God. The Trinity, of course, is a real trick, because, of course, you have to do this funny math. I mean, if I were honest with myself, up until maybe 15, 10, 5, the Trinity was kind of a boundary marker, right? It's what we use to distinguish ourselves from all those cults out there. And it also proved how serious your faith was, right? Because if you said you believe the Trinity, then boy, you're really believing something hard. It was kind of a, but what does it mean? Who knows? I think that gets it exactly backwards, right? The problem is, since roughly speaking, the Enlightenment, we believed in sort of Newton's conception of God. He was the one that first described God as someone very skilled in mechanics and geometry, right? He was a craftsman. He was really good at it. And the reason you believe in God is because, gee, you look at the universe and the way it's connected. I mean, only this supernatural creator could create something like this. And so God is simply the biggest, best, craftsman in the world, right? That later, a century or so later, that gets turned by William Paley into his famous watchmaker, right? God is this superhuman watchmaker that is really good at putting complicated stuff into. So he's just like, an Olympic weightlifter, pushed to the nth degree. He has all these human capabilities, but he's the maximum, right? He's the supreme being. Well, when you read, all the old guys, or people that read old guys, for 10 years with a friend, I started reading Aquinas and Barth together. I knew a lot of Aquinas and he knew a lot of Barth. And so we kind of got together and, filled in each other's holes. And, there are huge areas where Barth and Aquinas are very, very different, both substantively and stylistically. But they both absolutely agreed that picture of God, Newton's picture, William Paley's picture, this idea of the best thing in the universe, the most powerful thing in the universe, that's exactly backwards. God is not a craftsman. If you're going to compare him to anything, you got to compare him to an author. God is not one of us, only better. Well, okay. So you put that together with Paul, opening of Romans. Paul says the invisible power of God has been manifest to everyone. Yeah, I mean, there are very good reasons to think that you don't get a universe that is informed with the sort of meaning, the information. Nothing comes from nothing. There's a whole lot of information in this world. Just think about it chronologically. The Earth is what? Maybe 4 billion years old. And all there are on it are rocks and gas and whatnot. No information. And then at some point in time, we get the first biological organism. And to be an organism is to not just be complex, it is to contain information. I mean, we talk about DNA all the time as the information which does something. Well, where'd that information come from? Okay, well, you can flesh out the argument. You know, Aquinas would say you can't get something from nothing. Once there was no DNA, now there is DNA. And DNA is not just something complex, it's something that has information, meaning, significance. Where did that come from? Well, Paul tells us it comes from God. But now notice how Aquinas, when he fleshes out this argument, he's very, very careful. He doesn't just say, you know, I can prove the existence of God. All of his arguments conclude, and this divine informer, I like to call him, this is what we all call God. And even Paul in Romans, the power of God is evident. But what is this God? It's really something like a black box. We know there's something very powerful out there. You can't do science without it. This has nothing to do with intelligent design. In fact, I'm a very ardent critic of that. But we know that there's a creator. But is this creator good, bad, morally indifferent? That's a whole different ballgame, right? Darwin didn't lose his faith because he didn't believe in the God. He lost his faith because he had questions about the goodness of God and the way, you know, a God that's going to send his grandfather and father to eternal punishment. Darwin, I just can't believe in that. Anyway, back to the story about the Trinity. So, yes, we know that there's more in heaven and earth than is dreamed upon in Horatio's, you know, in Hamlet. Horatio is this Stoic philosopher, i.e. materialist. And Hamlet, his friend, says to him, there's more in heaven and earth than is dreamed upon in your materialist philosophy. Yes, that gets it exactly right. But is this good news, bad news, or morally indifferent news? How do we know that God is good, that he loves us, that we're not his playthings, his entertainment? You know, some of the old Babylonian creation stories, I'm told, right? Why did the gods make human beings? Because the lesser gods were tired of acting like slaves, and so they wanted to make us so that we would, you know, sacrifice these incense to them and, you know, some bulls and that sort of stuff every once in a while. Okay. The fact that we know that Horatio is wrong from good philosophy doesn't tell us squat about whether or not the existence of this God, this black box, is good news or bad news. Aquinas tells the story about two people out walking in the wilderness, and they see something coming down the road, and they know it's not a horse, it's not a bear, it's a person. But is this guy friend or foe? Until that guy yells out, hey, it's me, Peter, your friend. You don't know whether or not you're seeing good news coming or bad news. And so what's the punchline? It's Jesus Christ that tells us that it is good news that there is more in heaven and earth than is dreamed upon in Horatio's philosophy. That's the only way we get the goodness of God, is through the Trinity. The Trinity, the Incarnation, God becoming man. That's the only God that we can know loves us.